mitochondria will always have been the same mitochondria. That's anyway, off topic, but yeah, no, it's really, really freaking cool that all mitochondria are descended from the same.
We all have the same mitochondria, which is just
wild.
Yeah. We are talking today about whether or not a calorie is always a calorie.
Cool.
Because I've actually had a few chats with clients in the last couple of weeks, so it's quite fresh in my mind. Just about, what they're eating, how much they're eating, and stuff like that. And as you'll know, people are always they're always like, I eat all right, or I don't eat that much, or I'm not overeating and stuff like that. And in reality, their meals might not be large, but the composition of the meals is usually the problem, and the stuff in between. But how do we want to introduce to the audience about calories and what they are and what they mean? Should we go for that?
Yeah. So calories are just a unit of energy. It's the amount of energy required to heat a milliliter of water by 1 degree.
Do you know that always brings back is GCSE science with a Bunsen burner.
Until someone in the class lost an eyebrow and then Bunsen burners were removed.
Or unplugged a Bunsen burner and left fucking gas tap on. That was always fun.
I mean, the worst one was someone made sodium bromide in one of my chemistry classes accidentally out of the materials that were left on the table. And then we had to very, very quickly chuck the beaker in the little safety box and then run out. Yeah. That was a fun lesson. Sure.
Yeah.
So that's the basic definition of what calorie is, and fundamentally the conversation around why that's important to body composition or body weight is that we look at energy balance within the body based on the amount of calories you consume versus the amount of calories you burn, and that's how we define weight loss or weight gain or weight maintenance. So if you are eating the same number of calories as you burn, then you'll stay weight stable, pretty much. If you're burning more calories than you consume, then you're going to end up losing weight. And if you are eating more calories than you're burning, then you're going to end up gaining weight.
Yeah, I mean that's the tagline at the moment, isn't it? Eat less calories than you're burning, and you'll lose weight.
Yeah,
just straight up. That's the tagline that's being thrown out. And while it's not inherently false, it's not entirely accurate, because calories are not always calories, right?
So what do you mean by calories aren't always calories?
So for me, it's like bioavailability, right? So let's say, for example, I consume 1,000 calories in shake form. Like liquid calories blended up. Like let's say I put some peanut butter, I put some chocolate, I put blend up, get 1,000 calories in shake form, and then I get 1,000 calories of vegetables. Provided I can actually consume 1,000 calories of vegetables in one sitting.
I believe
the 1,000 calories I consume are not all accessible to me. Because there's a lot of very complex structured cellulose that it's difficult to break down. There's a lot of fiber. The body has to work quite hard to access all of those calories. So while in essence they are the same amount of calories, I'm probably going to take maybe 700, maybe 650 from. I mean, there's it's a very aggressive example in the amount of fiber that's in that. And the amount of accessible calories. So I'm probably going to take maybe 650, whereas that I'm going to take 1,000 calories. So instantly I've eaten the same amount of calories, but I've actually ended up with less.
So realistically, in that scenario, what you're saying is that it's kind of like a measuring issue in terms of how you measure how many calories you're actually intaking. So you might say that in the like, there's so many ways that we can be accurate with that, right? Whether it's knowing how much is actually being absorbed by the body, knowing how much you're actually consuming, because you might feel like you're getting the right information, but as we know with certain products that have been sold recently by certain food prep companies, that's not always the case. You might be given misleading information, you might mistrack, you might overtrack, you might undertrack. It's hard to be as precise as possible in terms of tracking how many calories you're taking in. And then the other side of that is like the whole idea of what processes are associated with nutrition. So like when I was doing my nutrition module at uni, the idea of nutrition was broken down into kind of 4 stages. So it's the IDAM model, where you have what's ingested, what's digested, what's absorbed, and what's metabolized. And all of those things and how different chemical reactions might have an impact on how certain things are metabolized and what effect that's then going to have on the body and overall calorie balance. What happens at the stage of absorption? What happens at the stage of digestion? Are you able to digest all of that food? Are you like digesting it to a point where it's absorbable, or is it just passing through your gut and being shut out? Is it? Are you actually measuring correctly when you're ingesting? So that's a really interesting element.
Yeah, and like one of the health claims that's made by so we'll say certain people on Instagram about how if you eat too much sugar, your body just then turns it into fat.
Yes.
And I remember distinctly in the nutrition element of my degree, my lecturer standing out there and going, your body will only do that as a last result because it's so inefficient to translate sugar to fat, because you lose like 40% of the calories. You lose 40% of the energy just by putting sugar through the process of so when we say sugar, we say carbohydrates. Your body gets excess carbohydrates, and it's like, okay, cool, we can't use all these carbohydrates, so we're gonna rather than just getting rid of the energy, we are going to convert it into fat, but it's only at a last possible moment. We can't use this instantly because we're not doing enough. We can't store this as glycogen in the cell. Okay, only at this point are we then going to convert it into fat, because we lose 40% of the energy that we've been given, and the body doesn't want to do that.
Yeah. So that makes sense. I've never heard that stat before, but I can understand that. I think there is merit to that argument though being made online. I think that's one of the other things that's being discussed, right? So the two sides of the argument are the people that say, oh well, it doesn't matter what you're eating. A calorie is always a calorie, and how that calorie interacts with your body is kind of irrelevant. If you've ingested this many calories and you've burnt this many calories, that's kind of that. And then the flip side of the argument is people like what's the name of the guy who runs the Zoe study? That's the one. Talking about the fact that we shouldn't bother counting calories. We should only really look at what foods we're consuming and how those foods interact with our body on a person by person basis. And if we can understand that, then most people will improve their health and improve their body composition and improve their weight. And
truth.
It's kind of one of those things, isn't it? It's both groups have something they're saying that is true. Like the way that different foods interact with different people will massively change the degree to which they gain or lose weight based on the foods they eat. And you can see that based on studies around Polynesians living on a westernized diet and the impact that has on weight gain within that particular subculture, because of the fact that they weren't exposed to high grain foods, processed foods for an extended period of time, and then all of a sudden it's just been thrown into their diet, and you see huge amounts of weight gain, diabetes, etc. within that group. In spite of the fact they're not necessarily consuming any more calories than you would expect them to need.
I did hear when I was at Scotland, one of the Polynesian guys was like, oh, but the national diet of Fijians is like whiskey and fried chicken. Which I don't think it actually is, but I know. I think that's also a culture where being overweight is seen as like a really good thing as well. So there's like an inherent drive to overeat anyway. And so you have calories to consume, so eat. And like you say, I think you throw a westernized diet at that mentality, and you're asking for trouble.
That's fair.
You know, not even necessarily from a calories consumed point of view, but from a shitty food consumed point of view. You know, because I think that's like another thing, and like as much as the nutrition gurus on the internet annoy me because they're very like, you can't ever eat any, you know, you're killing yourself or poisoning yourself by eating a hamburger, and it's like to an extent what they're saying is kind of true, because the quality of food that most of us consume on a regular basis is terrible. Like I'm reading, I probably said this in the last one, but I'm reading Bill Bryson's The Body. And like some of the stats on like the amount of sugar we consume like in a day and the amount of salt you consume in a day just because it's added to things. And like, you know, the whole rapeseed oil thing, like how rapeseed oil is, people are like, oh, it's poison for you, it's terrible. And it's like, it's actually not that bad. It's just the fact that it's in everything. And we're over consuming it to a massive degree because like,
and it's also like, there'll be people that will hear that and hear the thing like, we've got a note here about maybe talking about aspartame or aspartame or whatever you want to call it. And the number of people that will say, oh, like the amount of that thing you would need to eat in order for it to be toxic in any way, shape or form to a human being is like ridiculously high and really outside of the levels that you could consume. But equally, it's the summation of all of these additional stressors within our diet, within our lifestyles that we're experiencing. The sum total of all of that is probably getting to a point where it is having a toxic impact in certain cases. So whether that's...
Although with aspartame, just because I have it in my head, apparently the study that found out that it was linked to cancer was literally they gave like unbelievably high doses of pure aspartame to rats and they got cancer. And it was like, to get that amount of aspartame in your body, you would have to consume like 200 bottles of Coke. And you're like, it's actually quite difficult.
No, and I fully appreciate that, but it's the whole thing of we know that it doesn't serve a positive purpose. And we know that it does have the potential to have a negative impact. So educating people that it's absolutely fine is like, it's a stupid way of looking at it. It's like, I understand why it serves a purpose. I understand when it serves a purpose, in the fact that if you're someone who likes sweet things and you're also someone who is trying to lose weight and get into a calorie deficit, which we'll get back to in a minute, then having something that is sweetened with something that isn't adding calories to your diet and but it is giving you that, it's itching, it's scratching the itch you've got, then it's a useful thing. But like the long-term goal really for most people should be to try and reduce the degree to which they need sweet foods in their diet. And then they won't need to replace those sweet foods with
aspartame,
sweetened, falsely sweetened foods with products in them that aren't adding any value and are potentially causing harm.
Interestingly, just rolling with this addition things that people think are bad. Did you know that MSG is actually, the idea that it's bad for you is a complete myth? And it was like, it was just a guy who I think tried to synthesize the umami flavor the actual flavor of umami, and someone was just like, oh, that's bad for you, and then it stuck. Like there's no actual scientific evidence out there, like as in actual studies. It's just one of those things that someone said once and it stuck.
See, I want to look into that now, because I've never seen that, but that sounds like something worth circling back to at some point.
But like that blew my mind. That was again, I think in Bill Bryson's one, he was like, you know, this guy created this, and like there's never actually been any like intensive research into MSG. We just kind of all went, oh, they said it's bad. It's bad.
I believe it. I reckon it's... But we'll see. We'll find out. We'll find out soon, because I think that's a pretty interesting.
Maybe we can add that to.
I think it's one of those things where there might not be enough evidence in the same way as this aspartame one. There's not enough evidence to show that it's bad, but there might be enough evidence to show that it's bad. You know what I mean?
But it could be.
But it could be bad, and in high enough doses would be bad, and therefore when it's combined with every other stressor that we have, might be something that's worth looking at reducing. But anyway, we'll get back to that on another topic. So the whole concept from Tim Spector, going back to that, is that by improving the quality of the foods you eat and improving and making sure that you're eating foods that work well with your body, you'll see weight loss. And the number of times you see that people who are on the Zoe study lose weight and improve their overall markers of health, in spite of the fact they're not tracking calories, you can understand why he makes that argument.
Yes.
But equally, when you then look at their calorie intake, see a massive drop in calories, and it's just another way of gaining it, and it's another way of thinking about it, and it's another way of getting people to be more intuitive about how they eat, and more observant of how they eat, so that they're making better food choices.
I think the big thing that happens there, and like this, what I said to you before about having a conversation with my clients, and one thing I encourage all my clients to do is I'm like, just eat more whole food. Like actually just get food and make it yourself, and then you will by proxy consume less calories. Like it'll just happen.
Phil Learning. Like Phil Learning, I can't remember whether it was men's health or men's fitness. Really interesting guy, but his entire thing was eat short shelf life food. So eat more whole foods, eat more short shelf life food, because the things that aren't designed to last forever outside of just something that you can stuff in your cupboard and it will stay there for the next 10 years and then you can eat it. Anything that's designed to have that level of preservation is going to be harder for your body to digest, because if it's harder for it to be broken down organically by just being present in the environment, it's going to be harder for your body to digest. I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at how to improve the overall quality of your food. Just I'm going to have high turnover foods like more salad, more fruit, more meat, more fish, things like that are naturally a bit more healthful. And then obviously it kind of says, don't eat nuts and seeds and all those other things, which I would potentially say you should eat a reasonable amount of, but it takes away quite a lot of the crap that's been processed.
Interesting caveat to that though is that a lot of the food that does have quite a high shelf life is also incredibly easy for your body to digest, and I think it's kind of like a half and half thing. So you think white bread, don't. Please, I don't have the money. I'm not worth it.
We'll blank out. just get him to beep over it. Right? It'll be fine.
Your classic white bread that you buy from a supermarket. That's if you tried to butter it with cold butter, it would just rip. Right. That has incredibly long, and it's almost weirdly long living. I think the issue with that is it's super easy to break down, but they chuck a bunch of stuff in it. Basically, it's almost like you're eating antibiotics, because there has to be shit like that in that food to keep all the bacteria away, and then you're consuming that. And I think there's kind of a double-edged sword in that the food that lasts longer and is cheaper and also has more calories in it is the food that tastes better, because they've added sugar and they've done this. So you're almost you're fighting two battles at once. You're the stuff that tastes really good and is cheap is awful for me. And the stuff that doesn't taste as good and is more expensive is the stuff that I should be eating. But also, if I spent the same amount on it, I'd probably be under eating because I'm getting less calories from it.
There are cheapish things that you can eat that will give you a reasonably high amount, high calorie intake without, but just the basic kind of root vegetables and stuff like that you can get a decent amount of calories from without necessarily having to spend too much money on. Buying yourself some potatoes is it's relatively cheap. But so. But I think we'll circle back to that, because that's kind of something to sum up with the whole idea of how we would move forward food wise. But going back to, is a calorie always a calorie? From a scientific standpoint, if we say that it's just a unit of energy, then a calorie is always a calorie. But then how that calorie interacts with the body is interesting, and then understanding how both sides of that equation, so calories in versus calories out, can be affected or be unpredictable based on our ability to measure the calories coming in and actually truly being absorbed, and our ability to truly measure how many calories we're burning. Because a number of people that will just go, okay, well, my Garmin told me that I burnt this many calories, or my Fitbit, or whatever.
Yeah.
Don't want to plug Garmin, despite the fact they are excellent.
I mean, I think with that, the thing I always come back to, because again, another thing that really annoys me is when like fitness influencers will bash Garmin and like, you know, the conduction scales and things like that, say they're super inaccurate, and I'm like, you're using the wrong terminology. They are super, like they're not very accurate, but they're valid. I.e., like their inaccuracies, like their margin of error is consistent across time, right?
Yeah.
So all you need to do then is you need to look at how many calories your Garmin says you're burning.
Yeah.
And pick a number of calories to eat, like to track.
Yeah.
And see what happens to your weight. If your weight goes up, you reduce that number. If your weight goes down, you increase that number. So like it might not work out as like my Garmin says I burnt 5,000 calories and I'm eating 3,000 calories.
Yeah.
And somehow I'm gaining weight.
Yeah.
So like you can see the margin of error is up. But then if my Garmin then says I burnt 4,000 calories the next day, the likelihood is I burnt 4,000 less calories.
1,000 less calories.
1,000 less calories than the day before. And if it goes up by 500, like the changes are pretty good and they're pretty consistent. So as long as you measure it over time under the same conditions, it's all right. And then
in
you
the same
just
way
have
as
to...
the EI scales, like don't worry about necessarily what your body fat percentage says it is on the scale. Worry about what's happening to your body fat percentage. Yeah. But it's also the whole thing of like, if you don't trust your watch, if you don't use anything to track your calorie output, then you literally have no way of tracking. So it's like going, okay, right, well, we're not going to use this because it's horrendously inaccurate. So now I'm just going to guess. Yeah. And that's going to be more accurate. Like it's just it's just that whole thing of going, okay, right. It's tracking my activity. It's telling me roughly what it thinks I'm burning. I know based on that, I can make a decent prediction, decent guesstimate as to what I am actually burning, and use that data to my advantage. Which is like how you should use all data, right? It's the whole thing of like, there are so many people that are just trying to control every single bit of data. They're taking in all of this data and they're just going, okay, how do I regulate this and make sure that it's always the same, rather than going, okay, cool, I've got this data. I'm going to try and manipulate a couple of variables in my life, see what happens to the data, and then if things start to go wrong in terms of what I'm doing, if I'm not making progress anymore with my training, if I'm not making progress anymore in terms of my weight loss, I can look at that data and go, okay, here's all the data that I have. Here's why this might not be happening. So I've got more information as to why things might not be working. Yeah. And I can make more logical and more intelligent.
Yeah, like I've plateaued on my weight loss. I'm looking at the data. My calories out have stayed the same and my calories in have stayed the same. Yeah. So I probably either need to up my calories out or I need to reduce my calories in if I want to continue losing weight. It's as simple as that. Yep. Like,
I think coming to that then, so if we're talking about people, so the number of people that will talk about plateauing and the starvation mode of the body and all of those sorts of things, and what are your thoughts on because say for instance you've got someone who they start off on 2,200 calories a day and they're losing weight healthily, so they're probably hitting that 500 calorie a day deficit, and then that stops working, so you drop it down. Well, the weight loss starts to slow, so you drop it down by another 200 calories a day. So you drop it down to 2,000 calories a day. At which point, if it's a man, that's quite a low calorie intake. Yeah. And say they start to stagnate there, and they start to stop seeing weight loss there. Some coaches will then continue to drop the calories. Other coaches will talk about the fact that potentially they might need a refeed. Or something along those lines that's then going to reduce the strain on the body and allow them to adapt to a smaller stimulus again. So it's that whole idea of you can desensitize your body to a particular stimulus in the same way as you would with a strength training program, in the same way as you would with a hypertrophy program. And then you can take a break from that stimulus and then reapply the same stimulus and you'll see further response. What would you say to that? What's your thoughts on the idea of starvation mode, etc.?
I think, as with so many things, it depends on the individual. Like, because, you can lose a load of weight by dropping to like 700 calories for 2-3 weeks.
Yep.
and just doing it for 2-3 weeks and just absolutely blitzing it and losing a bunch of fat because your body's like utilize, like go, and then just up your calories again. Or you can drop it by like 100 calories, drop it by 100 calories, drop it by 100 calories, and then when the weight loss stops, you refeed and stuff. Like, I think, to be honest with you, it comes down to the individual and how the individual reacts and how they deal with that, because a lot of times
the duration over which they probably need to lose the weight. So if you've got someone who is pretty big and they've got a fair amount of weight to lose, getting that person to take extreme measures to lose that weight, when they've got a year to lose that weight, makes less sense than trying to find ways to fluctuate things over time. So that is the other thing to take into account. And then in terms of starvation mode, so like the reason I asked about that is because I had a few people turn around to me, clients recently, that have said, "Oh, starvation mode's bollocks, isn't it?" Because I saw some guys. So yeah, he said starvation mode's bollocks, and that he'd seen someone on social media say that there's no such thing as starvation mode. And like, I understand the whole. The polarization on social media is always a problem, and it's something that we kind of regularly discuss. But just because there are a few zealots on one side saying, "Oh, well, watch out for starvation mode," like, doesn't mean that we shouldn't value the fact that as you start your weight loss journey, typically the degree to which you lose weight versus your calorie deficit, those two lines do start to like merge, and your weight loss does start to slow in spite of the fact your like calorie deficit remains constant. And that's a sign that certain things are happening within the body that are changing the way in which you utilize calories, which makes complete sense, right? Because at the end of the day, it's an evolutionary, like, your body wants to be as efficient as it can be, and has mechanisms to become more efficient.
What I was going to say is the body is incredibly good at adapting. Incredibly good at adapting. You know, we see it all the time, like, and often its ability to adapt and maintain homeostasis, i.e., your body wants to be in balance. It always wants to be in balance, and that's what homeostasis means. For those who don't know what homeostasis means, it just means maintaining balance, right? Shifting the scales so that they're always balanced. And your body is so good at doing that, and so good at making things easy and finding shortcuts, that it's often our greatest weakness is our greatest strength. You know, like in the gym, people who are lifting things, often like the deviations from what we might call biomechanically perfect form is the body trying to find a way to move something that the position they're in currently doesn't have a capacity to move. It's why you see people around their backs and knees cave in. Like, it's that, you know, the hip, you're trying to extend the hip and do whatever. But basically, I think it's your body trying to find
it's like the whole idea of as you get fitter, so as you expose yourself to strength training, for instance, like the stronger you get. So say you expose yourself to the same program for an extended period of time. At first, that might be a stimulating load, but as you adapt, that then doesn't allow you to stimulate any further adaptation. So then it becomes a maintaining load. But then over time, your body becomes more efficient in terms of how it moves because of the adaptation continues. So all of a sudden, that stimulating load that led to you building increases in muscle strength, because you're now needing to produce less force at the level of the muscle when combined with the total muscular tendons unit, etc. Like, that's now not enough load on the bar to promote the maintenance of that degree of muscle mass. So you start to lose muscle mass in spite of the fact you're still lifting the same weight because you've become more efficient in terms of how you move. And then if we look at that and we transfer that across to how we react to a calorie deficit, it's the same sort of principle. Like, if you expose yourself to a calorie deficit, if you've constantly overeaten and as a result, your body's been able to be inefficient in terms of how it utilizes those calories, and then you go, okay, cool, we're just going to restrict calories a little bit, you'll see rapid weight loss. But then your body will become more efficient in terms of how it utilizes those calories, because it will start to switch to using more beta oxidation, loads of other things that might take place in the body. Like, your mitochondria have several states that they can be in, and they can become more or less efficient depending on the need of the body. Or we might reduce certain processes that take place within the body. We might slow those processes down. So rate of repair of cells, rate of replacement of cells, etc. might drop, or other things that can reduce metabolic output, therefore making our bodies more efficient generally as a whole, so we can operate on a much lower calorie intake than we previously would have been able to, which long-term wise, health-wise, is a great adaptation. But when it comes to like weight loss, which is your goal, it's the worst adaptation you could possibly imagine, because then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well now I've got to cut my calories ridiculously because of the fact my body's too efficient. Rather than just going, okay, I'll just give my body a few more calories, let it become a bit less efficient again, let it realise that it's okay, it doesn't need to stop all these other processes happening, and then return to calorie deficit, and you don't need to drop the calories as far.
It's just like you say, it's your body balancing. It's your body going, hey, you've got less food, let's adapt to having less food. And then when you adapt to having less food, when you start eating more food, your body's like, hey, we've now got more food, let's store that food so that the next time we have less food, we're okay. And it seems really reductionist, really stupid, but like that is what your body is good at, and that is like our super strength as a species, is an ability to be like, hey, whatever the environmental conditions are, we adapt like that. We're super quick. We're like, we're cold. Okay, let's shiver. Let's let's store more fat. Let's any calories that we got straight in.
I think the funny thing is when you look at that and you go, okay, the acute effects are different to the long-term effects in a lot of cases. So like when we apply a stressor, the short-term impact, like cold, would be, all right, we need to shiver, and we're going to burn energy to create heat internally, and then the long-term effect of that is okay, right, we're going to add more fat so we're more insulated, so we don't need to shiver, so we can respond better to cold, we can regulate our temperature better in cold environments. So in the first instance, you burn more like calories and as a result burn more fat, so you might see a reduction in body composition with cold exposure, and then long term you see an increase in
but then also you shiver less over time, because your body's like, hey, actually we're in a cold condition that's going to require a lot of heat to stay warm, so let's not use like the calories to shiver, and let's instead, like you say, flip, and let's store more fat so we can burn that and stay warm.
So long as there's space for that adaptation. Because otherwise you're just constantly in that stressed state, and your body never gets the opportunity to adapt and create those chronic adaptations.
Little extra tidbit because I'm fat. Because it's just in my mind, and I just feel like it's really cool. It blew my mind yesterday. Did you know that we are all mitochondrially descended from a common ancestor?
Which is fucking awesome, right? The whole idea, but the fact that the mitochondria was a completely separate organism originally, and then became.
Well, I mean, so this is the cool. So like, sperm don't pass on their mitochondria. So you inherited your mitochondria from your mum. So as it goes down the line, the genetic pool of mitochondria narrows, and we've been doing that for so long that every single person in the world, their mitochondria are descended from this one woman way back in time.
Or Eve.
We've all got, her nickname is like Mitochondrial Eve, because we've all got the same mitochondria, which is just.
But I thought the idea was that because of the fact that at a certain point these two organisms merged, so this mitochondrial organelle, as we see it, merged with another cell and became part of that organism, and in so doing allowed that organism to develop into multicellular species, and allowed it to find better ways and more efficient ways of releasing and producing energy. So they had this like symbiotic relationship, and that is what has allowed it. And that same mitochondria, so that mitochondrial DNA is separate to our DNA. So we don't produce mitochondria from our DNA. It's a separate thing that replicates.
But that obviously happened multiple times, right? So like in the way that nature does, it happens multiple times, right?
Yeah, but it would have happened. I thought the idea was it happened in one scenario, and then that evolved into multiple different species. So it wasn't that one human being suddenly ended up with mitochondria. It was that one cell evolved with mitochondria, evolved into multiple human beings.
But those mitochondria, every time they replicate, will have genetic diversity within them, right? So, like, I mean, the basically.
So if you divide a cell, it doesn't change its genetic makeup. If your cells divide, you still have the same genetic makeup within your cells. All of your cells still have your DNA code. Like, there's occasional mutations and certain cells will come out of whack, but like that mitochondria will replicate multiple times within a cell. And then when there's enough mitochondria within that cell can divide and create two cells with multiple mitochondria, and then repeat that process can repeat, and then those cells can then go on to become multicellular bodies and then evolve into different animals, different species, and human beings eventually, and then as a result. But the mitochondria will always have been the same mitochondria. That's anyway, off topic, but it's really, really freaking cool that all mitochondria are descended from the same.
We all have the same mitochondria, which is just
wild. Yeah. You need to carry on reading Bill Bryson books because
I know it's just this. Honestly, every night I'm like, what? I won't get into some of the other ones because they're like crazy, like how they used to remove bladder stones. That was wild. But we won't get into that. Anyway, to surmise.
Yes.
Is a calorie always a calorie? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
And no. A calorie is always a calorie, but the way that calorie interacts with our body is going to be different depending on the type of macronutrient or the type of food, how that food's been processed, how that food's been prepared, how that food's digested by us as an individual. That's all gonna change everything.
How it's stored in the food.
Yeah.
Like, is it in the form of cellulose? Is it in the form of like things that we can easily assimilate? Are they the correct? Like taking vitamin K or vitamin D, like. The food where you get vitamin D from always has vitamin K because you need vitamin K to absorb vitamin D. So, like, even from a vitamin perspective, certain foods are just inaccessible to us because we don't have things that digest it. So, while they may contain X amount of calories, we cannot assimilate X amount of calories from that same food.
Yeah.
So,
think about the impact of someone with lactose intolerance consuming the same amount of milk as you consume, and then
they would not get all of those calories.
They would not get all of those calories. They would not get all of those calories, and they would not have many friends.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's it, right? A calorie is always a calorie.
Yeah, at scientific level, a calorie is always a calorie.
We cannot always access all of the calories,
and we can't perfectly accurately track how many calories we're consuming, and we can't perfectly accurately track how many calories we are burning.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do the best we can with the information that we have and make adjustments based on our own knowledge, our own experience of how our bodies adapt and react.
Yeah. And if you want to lose weight, like if you want to supercharge, for want of a better word, if you want to get better weight loss, just eat more whole food and cut the crap, because genuinely you'll just take on less calories and it will probably make a difference. Like that.
See, I would say for the vast majority of people starting their weight loss journey who haven't done anything with their nutrition, having a health focus ahead of a weight loss focus is, especially if they've got a long time to lose the weight, is the best way to go.
100%.
Because in fact, you will naturally see a reduction in calorie intake. You will naturally be more invested, more mindful of what you're eating. You'll make better decisions, and you'll put yourself in a position where down the line it's easier for you to cut calories.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be in a position. The worst thing you see when people start their weight loss journey and they have a really unhealthy diet is that they'll lose the weight, but then when they switch up and go back to their original diet, they haven't learned the healthy habits that are going to help keep that weight loss off. Whereas if someone loses the weight by approaching nutrition in a more healthy way, and then continues that weight loss journey by trying to focus more on how many calories they're consuming.
Yeah.
When they then come off their diet, they'll know how to eat in a more healthful way and in a way that allowed them to lose the weight in the first instance, so they're more likely to maintain that weight loss.
Yeah. Because rather than just eating less shit food, they're eating usually more better food. So you actually end up, rather than restricting, you're adding.
Yeah.
And you're eating better food and usually more of it. And then you're like, oh, so I'm not hungry. I don't have to like be hungry all the time to like have a better body composition and be healthier.
Yeah.
I just eat more of better food.
But that's the whole thing in terms of behavioural change, just generally, right? Like the focus when it comes to behavioural change. If you can focus on what you're giving yourself, what you're adding to your life, as opposed to what you're stopping yourself from doing, it's a much more positive journey. 100%. Because it's that whole thing of like the number of. I remember reading something called Bridging the Gap, and it was the majority of people move from a place of anxiety and move from this place where they're trying to run from something, but as a result don't know what they're running to, and they're always focused on the thing chasing them down. Whereas if you know what you're running towards and you can see this positive future for yourself and you're just building a bridge towards it, that is a much more sustainable and much better way to like approach things, because then you're focused on the positive rather than focused on the negative.
Yeah.
You're taking an approach behavior, you know the direction of travel, rather than just being like, okay, well, I just need to frantically avoid this thing coming after me, and I'm going to run in whatever direction is easiest.
Yeah. There you go. We've solved nutrition. What should we solve next?
Male pattern baldness.
Ouch.